we were sitting on the couch in my apartment watching wrestling on Monday night from Madison Square Garden. I said, gee, ref's doing a lousy job. And he said, oh, you could do better. And I said, I bet you I could.
Did you ever enjoy taking bumps?
I didn't mind taking them. I didn't. I see a guy screaming and yelling and pointing at me, and I see a gun sticking out of his pocket. He was screaming in Spanish. I don't think he was saying, ref, you're doing a good job. Well, he comes in the locker room one night and he goes, I got a great idea for tonight, Referee Dave. I am wrestling Slaughter. Slaughter will duck, and I will take my blade and slice your forehead. And I go, I don't think so. If you worked with two refs on a small independent show, you get $50. If you were the only ref, you get 75 or 100.
Your Mount Rushmore of referees. Wrestling fans, if you're 40 years old or older like myself, you've been probably watching our guest for over half your life and not even know it. Joining us this week is a man who has over 30 years in the wrestling business. He's a former WWF referee and a published author. Please welcome to the show, Dave Dwinell. Dave, thank you very much.
Well, Aaron, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you this evening.
As I mentioned in the opening, we have over 30 years to cover. Said you're a published author. Why don't you talk about your book here called Ringman?
Well, I retired about 10 years ago. I never refereed full time. I always did it weekends, summers, evenings. And when I worked with the WWF, which it was at the time, I basically worked evenings with them. I was a state official. And it's funny because state officials, like the wrestlers back then, and maybe even today, the wrestlers and the refs, we were vendors. I don't know if ever heard that or not. We were vendors. We were put to work for the day. We were hired for the day. So I never really, I worked for them, but I didn't work for them. And I was fortunate enough to appear in the garden about 12 times. And when I retired, I needed a project to work on to keep my mind active so dementia won't be setting in. And I decided to write a book. Now, I'm not anyone famous, and people watching this today are going to go, who's this guy? Well, like I say, I stuck around the business for 32 years, and obviously no one ever paid to see a referee. But I had a lot of very interesting stories. I did travel on the road with some of the very large independents back in the 80s. And I felt, having worked the first matches of many of the future stars, I was a new kid on the block back in the 80s and 90s. And the older refs, they wanted to take the stars, the headliners. So they said, gee, Dave, you're going to take this new guy tonight, some guy called The Undertaker. I said, all right, I'll be glad to work with him. Oh, you're going to take this new guy. It was his third match, and we don't know much about him. He's the Dingo Warrior. All right, I'll work with him. There's a new group called the Heart Foundation, and you're going to take them. And these were all preliminary matches. But it was a great honor to be able to work with them in these preliminary matches. And I just felt it would be fun to tell stories about strange things that happened in the ring, what it was like back in kayfabe era, where it was not like the audience of today. You had blue collar workers smoking and drinking, and I would come out of the locker room in 1982, the year I started. You couldn't even see the ring because of the smoke. So I
Right.
said,
Yeah.
I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to call it Ringman, and it's going to be a fan-based book. Nobody gets thrown under the bus. If they want to hear dirt and inside dirt and all of this, it's not a book for people. But if it's somebody who was a fan of the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, I think they would really enjoy it. And I tried to keep the price down to $14.99, $5.99 on Kindle, because I wanted to. I didn't expect to make a lot of money off it, but I wanted to share what I went through with the fans because I think it's worth documenting. And Slam up in Canada, you're familiar with them. They gave it a really great a really great review. And they said it's like you're sitting in a bar with Dave and talking about his experiences. And it's about me, but it's not so much about me as it is about the era. And I think fans, if they bought it, they can get it from the company that prints it for me, bookbaby.com, bookbaby.com, if they Google that. It is available on Amazon. However, Amazon will say we're sold out, which they only had a limited supply, and it takes them about a week or so to get it. So if you go to BookBaby, if you're interested, um, you can get it off of them or get the Kindle edition for $5.99, or you can read the first chapter and a half for free on Amazon or BookBaby. It's out there. You just press enter here, and you get to get a taste of what it's like. So thank you for mentioning the book, and it was really pleasurable to write it. It brought back a lot of great memories.
Oh man, I love the book. I bought it and I said I read it in like 2 sessions. I could not put it down. It was a fantastic read.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah. So speaking of the book, let's dig into some of the stuff. 30 years is a lot to cover, as we said. So, um, right now,
It
as a
went by
kid,
fast.
right? Yeah, honestly. Now, as a kid, you originally got the bug from wrestling from your parents buying your first black and white TV, and you got to see your favorite wrestlers on there, and Bruno Sammartino was one of them. And then eventually, you actually got to see Bruno in action live. And why don't you
Mhm.
tell the audience what just made that night so special for you?
Well, when we got to TV, there were only about five channels on. And I didn't see anything I enjoyed because I was like a 12-year-old kid. So I see these guys beating the crap out of each other. And I said, gee, this is interesting. But what am I watching? They don't have gloves on. It's not boxing. And then they called it something professional wrestling. And I found out when I got a little bit older. So I started a league on the front lawn with my brother. And we pretended, because in those days you didn't have Google, you didn't have computers, you didn't have smartphones. If you were a kid growing up in the summer, you had to find something to do outside because the
Hmm.
TV, even TV, few soap operas might have been on. So I'd wrestle on the front lawn and I'd be this guy or that guy, and my brother would be the face or the heel. And then when I got a little older, I found out they were coming to the Worcester Auditorium. I grew up in a small mill town in Massachusetts called Millbury, where everybody worked in the mills, including my father. And I went to see wrestling live. And my brother and I were probably the only kids in there, young people. I was probably about 14, 13, and my brother was a little bit younger. And we were the only kids in there. It was blue collar workers smoking, drinking, and betting on the matches.
Hmm.
So I got to see Bruno live. He went in the ring. He battled Prince Curtis Iakia. And actually, we met Curtis in the hallway. We were walking around the hallway, hoping to see a wrestler, and all of a sudden, behind us, his voice goes, "Hey, kids!" And we turned around, and I'm up to about his probably stomach, and I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Where's the men's room? Do you know?" So I showed him where the men's room were, and that was a pretty big thing, getting to see a wrestler in front of me live. So Bruno comes out, and of course, everybody was cheering, and he won the match, and it was fantastic. And a few years later, when I was in high school, we went to the New York World's Fair in 1964. And um, I walked into the fair with my parents, and there I see appearing at 11 o'clock is Bruno Sammartino at the Schaefer Beer Pavilion, in one of the beer pavilions. So I went over, and he's carrying a quarter keg on each shoulder. He's walking around. I said, I got to talk to him after. So I waited till everybody left. And I went over. I said, Bruno, I'll probably never get to see you again. Can I talk to you? And he goes, sit down. And he spent about 8 minutes talking to me, which was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So 20 years later, I find myself in a ring with him. He came out of retirement for one match, maybe to replace his son who had left prematurely. He had left kind of quickly. So he came out for one match, and we're in the ring, and I know he was going to win. So there was no cameras on the phones in those days, but I see a guy with a zoom lens in the front row. So I went up to him and put my street clothes on, and I said, "Would you take a picture if Bruno wins?" So me raising his hand. So I get in the ring with Bruno, and he wins. He was Cowboy Bob Orton was counted out, Randy Orton's father. And I raised his hand, but we're on the wrong side of the ring. So I dragged him all the way around the ring. I said, Bruno, you got to come with me. We're all the way around the ring. And he said, are we on TV? And I said, no. But I said, I'll tell you in the locker room. So I raised his hand for a few minutes. Then we went to the locker room, and I said, well, let me explain. I had to get a picture of me raising your hand. I said, I'm a relatively new referee, but this could be the greatest bout I ever work. and he got a big kick out of it. He probably figured this guy's as much a mark as he is a referee, but for that match, I might have been. So life is funny. And then I met him 20 years later, and I had him sign the picture. And
Oh, wow.
I
Nice.
reminded him about the World's Fair, and he said he still had marks on his shoulders from carrying those two each of the quarter kegs around on his shoulders. So he was a wonderful, wonderful man. I did get to spend some time with him. He commentated on a show I worked out in Pennsylvania, and we went out for dinner after, and we had dinner together, and I had a chance to talk with him. And he's just a wonderful, wonderful man, and a really champion in and outside the ring. And he told me something that night that I'll never forget. He said, Dave, if there's 5 people, 50 people, 50,000 or 500,000, you work the same way. You work hard because the people in the audience, the 10 people in the audience, might have saved up for weeks to see this wrestling show, and you owe them the best you have. Just a wonderful man.
It's funny that you bring up David, actually. I wanted to talk to you about that. As you mentioned too, you said that Bruno was a champion inside and outside the ring. He never drank wine in front of children. Why do you think the success didn't pass down from Bruno to David? And why do you think David left the business prematurely?
Um, I think David, like maybe some other children of wrestlers, may have been, I'm not going to say forced into the business, but Bruno would have liked him to have carried on the family tradition. And how do you carry on a family tradition that your father was champion for like over a decade?
Right, yeah.
The two times you really can't. And I worked with David on an independent show, and I asked him, "How's your dad?" And he had said to me, "Well, we haven't talked in a couple years," which I thought was very, very sad. David was a very nice young man. Matter of fact, I refereed him against Ivan Koloff, and it was a great, great, great match. But it seems that the sons of wrestlers, whether it's Reed Flair or the Flairs, or Ric Flair's children, whether it's Bruno's, and there were others, Orton,
The Von
Randy Orton,
Erichs.
the Von Erich, a lot of pressure on them to live up to their father's expectations. And I think if I had a son who was going to go into wrestling and I was a wrestler, I would tell him to be himself. And I'll be proud of you no matter how you work in there. But if you don't want to wrestle, I'm not going to put pressure on you. And I think they must have felt pressure and not being able to live up to their fathers who were quite famous.
Yeah, unfortunately, that seems to be the case. But to backtrack a little bit now, before in your early career, well, before you started your career, actually, you originally got the itch to become a referee by watching wrestling and watching a referee doing something that really annoyed you. And then basically your friend dared you to do better. Do you want to talk to the audience about how that happened?
Well, we were sitting on the couch in my apartment watching wrestling on Monday night from Madison Square Garden. I said, "Gee, the ref's doing a lousy job." And he said, "Oh, you could do better." And I said, "I bet you I could." They said, "Well, why don't you?" I said, "You know what? I'm going to." And I became a man on a mission. And I couldn't find a number for the WWF. I tried because there were no Googles, and again, no computers in those days, no Googles, none of that stuff. So I found Capital Wrestling. I called him 25 times, and on the 26th time, a guy answers the phone and says, I don't know who he was. It might have been Phil Zacco or Willie Gilsenberg, but somebody said, hello. I said, hello. I said, what do you want? I said, well, I said, I'd like to, is this Capital Wrestling? Yeah, who wants to know? And I said, well, it's Dave Dwinell. Well, what do you want? I said, I want to be a referee. We don't need any, get lost. I said, well, can I send you a resume? He said, don't send me any gifts. The answer is still no. So he hung up. I said, that went well. So I looked up where they were located, and I found out I was working at the Trade Center at the time. As I said, I always had a legitimate job. So I'm working at the Trade Center, and I found out they listed an address in Midtown Manhattan. So I went up and I found it to be the Holland Hotel. So I went there every day at lunchtime, for about an hour and a half, for about 2 weeks straight. So figuring maybe I'll see someone going in or out. Well, the doorman comes out and he comes on to me. He says, "What are you, a cop, a detective, a Secret Service, a stalker, or just a nut?" And I said, "I'm looking for somebody from the WWF." He goes, "They're only here 2 days a month for the guard." And he says, it was a sham office." So I was about ready to give up, but then I met someone that told me you had to be licensed in New York, and I got the license, and I persisted, and they let me work, and they got a new commissioner. In those days, you had to be part of the wrestling commission. You had to have a license, and so I complained that they weren't assigning me. I said, "You took my $50, and I'd like to work." Well, I started yelling at the clerk, and the boss comes out, and he said, "Well, we'll give you a shot." So I went to the county center in White Plains. Arnold Skolin ran the show. I had never stepped foot in a wrestling ring. I never talked to a wrestler. Didn't know if it was fake or real. I had no idea if they didn't like me, if they'd throw me out of the ring. So I watched about 200 wrestling tapes before the first show, looking at the ref. And it's 5,000 people. And it's a WWF show. The Rock's father was on the show. It was Christmas time. I presume The Rock was with him. And Ani goes to me, "You better go upstairs and talk to Rods. It's getting late." So I go upstairs and I said, "Well, what do I talk about? The weather? How's the wife? Is wrestling fake?" You know, I don't even know which ropes to climb through. So fortunately, I made it through the show thanks to Johnny. Johnny was a great help to me. He got me through the match, and he even made me an integral part of it. It was him and 21-year-old Eddie Gilbert. And he made me an integral part. I pushed him, he pushed me, I pushed him, he pushed me hard. I disqualified him. I threatened to fine him with the commission, and everybody, all the 5,000 people popped. So he gave me a pop in the very first show. And then they put a new commissioner in who was friends of friends, and he said, "I'll watch your work. If you can work well, we'll use you." So from there, 32 years later, I was still working and did my last match. So it was kind of weird. There weren't really wrestling schools in those days. Most of the refs had either been sons of referees or Dick Kroll, who had been a wrestler at one time, Jack Lotz, people like that. Gilberto Roman was in at that time. So I was very fortunate that through persistence, I was able to enter into the squared circle.
I want to go back to you watching these like hundreds of tapes just to do your
Oh,
own
yeah, I
training.
exaggerated. It might have been 50, but
50, but yeah, still like either way, what were some of the things that you were taking notes on? And were you in front of your mirror practicing your 3 counts and
no,
practicing your
no,
twos?
I watched the referees to see where they stood,
Yeah.
what hand gestures they used. Um, uh, Johnny was very good. Johnny said, "Look, when you get down for the count, you put your head next to the shoulders to add legitimacy, because you see, the referees had to add legitimacy in
Mhm.
those days." Johnny said, "You're the sheriff. You're the boss in the ring. You got to make this look real with us. So what you're doing is you don't favor the face of the heel, enforce the rules." So Johnny did help me. However, I did watch these tapes and I did find out where they standing. Was it a fast count, a slow count, a medium count? How not to get in the way, when to get involved, what to do. So that was my basic training. But I also trained in the ring. I was getting on-site training.
Right.
But I figured I better watch these tapes and study the refs, and perhaps it'll get me through the matches. But there were certain things in the first match I found out, like in those days, they used canvas on the rings, and it was tied at the end with ropes. And by the third match, you'd have ripples in the ring. And because it was canvas, I had burn marks all over my knees after the first show. So I went out and got wrestling knee pads, large wrestling knee pads that I wore under my knees, so I wouldn't end up, you know. But it was quite an experience. I thought it was going to be one and out, that I would referee once and then maybe never do it again, and I'd have something to tell my grandchildren. But fortunately, it worked out for me.
Do you think refereeing is more of a lost art today than it was back when you started out?
Well, I won't knock the refs today. They got it a little bit harder probably because of the large, humongous crowds.
Hmm.
And I think they do a good job, but there don't seem to be rules anymore.
No,
I mean, if
it's
I
like
got to
tag
the
team
10
wrestling.
count,
It's a lost art.
pardon?
It's like
Pardon?
tag team wrestling. It's like tag team wrestling. It's a lost art.
Mm, mm, you're right. Um, if someone was outside the ring and I got to 10, they're disqualified. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to if it wasn't the time, so you push the guy back and start the count all over again. And um, but if I got to 10, you're gone. They're outside the ring for 10 minutes,
Right? Yeah.
hitting them with everything they can. So there's no 10 count anymore. Okay, that's gone by. Guys come in the ring, three guys come in the ring and beat up a guy, and a referee standing there and does nothing. And I'm not blaming a ref because he's told to do this, but in those days, there seemed to be certain rules and regulations that had to be followed, which I think lended a tendency towards being more of a sport than a spectacle. Um, I mean, I would get in Madison Square Garden, I would get in a ring, and and actually, I was lucky. I worked the last match where the drop microphone from the ceiling came down.
Right. Yeah.
Remember the old drop? I didn't realize that till recently that I was in the last match where they used that. Well, I would get in a ring, and the lights would go out, and the ring lights would come on, and Howard Finkel would say, "Good evening," and 18,000 people would all erupt at the same time, and they would react to every move. Now, obviously, the guys today are bigger, they're quicker, they're faster, they're getting paid a lot more money, but I don't see the reaction from the crowd that I noticed in those days. It would really pump you up. Um, I don't even know. I was told maybe sometimes they put in canned applause and boos. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, we would you would hear 16,000, 18,000 people screaming their heads off just at the words "Good evening." I
Hmm.
get the idea in some of the shows I've gone to. Uh, I don't go to too many, but some of the shows I've gone to, um, I I get the impression that a lot of the people are there kind of like a Broadway show. They want to see the superstars, which is not which they did in the old days also, but they wanted to see the superstars. And they're kind of like there for a happening because so many kids today are on their cell phones, they're on a computer. Now they're with other people and they're participating in a happening and they see their stars and they seem to be almost as taken up with the stars as they are with the matches themselves.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but that's a little bit of the impression I get. And again, I'm not knocking it. They have done a phenomenal job with wrestling. They've brought it to new heights. But again, in the old days when it was kayfabe, and we appeared in high schools and colleges, so there was a closeness to the people. Can you imagine Roman Reigns or Cody Rhodes appearing at your local high school? But Bob
No.
Backlund did it. Iron Sheik did it. They all did it. Um, and that was because in those days it was territorialized, and they had to give them shots between they'd start off
The big
in
paydays.
Washington. They start off in
Yeah.
Washington, go to Philly, go to Madison Square Garden. They had to find something in between and give the guys work.
Right.
I mean, Lou Albano drove a cab. A lot of the guys back in the 70s and 80s, they had other jobs. Lou Albano drove a cab in Mount Vernon. So, I like I say, I'm not knocking today. The product is big. The guys are big. They're tremendously talented.
Hmm.
But I think the referee's job was a little bit harder back then because you had to be more of an integral part. And if you had a horrible match, which you could have on some of the independent shows, there's an old saying that Johnny Rodz had: a bad ref can save a good match. A bad ref can ruin a good match, and a good ref can save a bad match. I don't know if you ever heard that or not, but back in those days, that was quite true.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, you are on record saying that you actually prefer refereeing the technical wrestlers in the technical matches. Is that because you're more involved in the matches with more near falls, or why is that?
Well, early on, I knew there were three leagues because I bought magazines. Because in
Mhm.
the kayfabe days, most of the magazines just had the East Coast because they were printed in the East Coast. But when I first started buying magazines, like Ring Magazine, it would be in a boxing magazine and it'd have 10 pages or 5 pages at the end of the magazine. And they'd list the standings for NWA, AWA, and WWF. So I
Mhm.
knew there was more than one league. And then when they started showing Georgia wrestling and they started showing AWA, and I saw people like Bockwinkel and Race, and they added more of a sport to it, I thought. You know what I'm saying? They seemed to be more athletic and different than the WWF,
Like a
but
legit competition.
less characters. And this is just me because I always loved the sports angle of it. So when Pro Wrestling USA came to, you're familiar with Pro Wrestling USA, they were the combination of AWA. Vince started going in their territories. So they started coming into Vince's territory. So they got the AWA, the NWA, and Georgia Wrestling to kind of come in to Vince's territory. So they came to New York. And of course, they had to use state officials. So I loved working their matches, working with the Road Warriors,
Mhm.
I did a match with Nick Bockwinkel and um, Rick Martel.
Okay.
And in the corner of Bockwinkel was Buddy Rogers, the first WWF champion. So I was
Right. Yeah.
standing in the ring with Martel, Bockwinkel, two outstanding workers, and Buddy Rogers. And they had a 18-minute match without a rest hold. And I found that exciting because, like you had mentioned, I was more involved. There was a lot of false finishes. And finally, at the
Mhm.
end, Bockwinkel had his leg over the rope. Martel was the champion. Bockwinkel had his leg over the rope, and I missed it. And I counted three, and Rogers came in and gave me heat, and Bockwinkel gave me heat. But there was a sense of realism to this, that these guys were athletes. They weren't Doink the Clown or someone like that. Not that Doink was an athlete. Ray Liccamelli's a good friend, and he's a good athlete. He was the last Doink. But I just really, Harley Race. I mean, I was in awe working, and I shouldn't say that, I sound like a mark, but I was in awe of working with people like Harley Race.
Of
And
course.
people like Nick Bockwinkel, and who was some of the other great ones that the Road Warriors, people of that nature. Was just an honor. I worked even with Magnum TA. I go as far back as
Oh wow.
Magnum, Superstar Graham when he was with the NWA. So just so many wonderful people. And I did, not that I didn't enjoy, obviously, I enjoyed the pay at the Garden and the Nassau Coliseum a lot more than I did at some of the smaller shows.
Yeah.
But and certainly back prior to Hogan, I would say back in those days, there was a lot of real wrestling going on in the WWF also. But I always enjoyed a good match that gave me a challenge.
Did you ever enjoy taking bumps?
Um, I didn't mind taking them. I didn't. I didn't mind as long as I knew the guy that was giving the bump knew how to give a bump. In some of the independent shows, I was going to take a corner bump where you get pulled in by the heel and you pulled in by the face. No, pulled in by the heel and the face comes along and he goes into you like this in the corner.
Yeah.
Well, this guy had never done this before and he thought it was real and he bruised three of my ribs.
Oh no.
Okay. And I fell down and it was not a pleasant sight. And then another night they had a guy who had lighter fluid in his mouth and had a torch and he was going to blow fire across the ring. And I wasn't sure and I wasn't ready. And I turned around, he singed my eyebrows off. And then he threw it
Oh
outside the
jeez.
ring and you threw it outside the ring and a plastic ring apron caught on fire. But I I took some pretty good bumps over the years. I had one that I enjoy watching on tape. Sid Vicious picked up King Kong Bundy as high as he could, swung him around, and hit me with the boot. And I went flying out of the ring into a bunch of people sitting on steel chairs outside the ring. Um, but basically, most of the time, the guys WWF, if I took a bump, there was one in the garden where Rick Rude threw me across the ring. He was battling Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And, I never got hurt from, well, I shouldn't say that. I had an accidental bump. Well, there was that one where the guy ran into me, but
Right. Yeah.
Samu, there was a tag team match. Samu and maybe Fatu
Okay.
were wrestling possibly the Rock and Roll Express. And there was one point where I was doing a count, 1, 2. Samu got drop kicked and was supposed to fall near me, and I was going to roll over and pretend to be knocked out. Well, he fell square on my back,
Oh,
and I had to do it the same match 2 more nights in a row. We were traveling on the road, so I ended up with the next 2 nights looking up when that spot came, and people going in the audience, this ref's kind of weird. He keeps looking at the ceiling, but I kept looking up to make sure when he came down, I was going to be able to roll out of the way, or at least make it look like I got hit and not really get hit.
all right. Yeah. Speaking of Psycho Sid, though, you mentioned that he always like you've refereed him numerous times on the independent scene. That he's always had
Right.
a couple spots for you in every single match. Is there any
Yeah.
other, or are there any other wrestlers that would love to get you involved like that and have spots ready
The
for
Iron
you?
Sheik. The Iron
Sheik,
Sheik.
yeah.
Oh yeah, hey, Referee Dave, I love working with you. You're my favorite ref. And of course, once in a while he would smoke the funny smoke. Well,
Hmm.
he comes in the locker room one night and he goes, I got a great idea for tonight, Referee Dave. I am wrestling Slaughter. Slaughter will duck and I will take my blade and slice your forehead. And I go, I don't think so. I said, that's not in my contract, Sheik. It's not in my contract. I don't bleed. No, but I want to make you look good. I said, no, I look fine. No, but does Sheik really like you and he's going to make you look good and you're going to enjoy this and it's going to be one. No, that's okay. I said, I think I look pretty good.
Dave, why don't you tell the audience a little bit of the differences between the independent scene from when you started and the 90s and even today?
Well, the independent scene, there were a couple of big promotions on the East Coast that I worked for, and one was the old Northeast Championship Wrestling. I'd go out maybe twice a month for a couple of days with them on the road, and on a Saturday or Sunday, as I mentioned, I had a regular weekday job, and they would use people like the Sheik, they would use Slaughter, they would use Abby, they would use a bunch of stars, Snooker, because WWF would let them work extra shows in those days, and also some of them had been dropped by the WWF. And so I did get to work on the independents, and they were always fun because they were in high schools, colleges, small arenas. You get to spend time talking to the fans. But there were also some very dangerous independent shows back in those days,
Mhm.
back in New York, because New York state officials didn't just work for the WWF, they worked for the indies. I would get called for an assignment, kind of like a boxing ref. Well, I get a call. I worked 2 big WWF shows. And I said, this is great. This is awesome. I'm ready for the garden. Then I got a call and they said, Dave, first of all, in the independents, you normally did all 7 or 8 matches. They wanted to save money. Like in New York, for the garden, you'd get top dollar. For the Coliseum, you'd get top dollar. If you worked with 2 refs on a small independent show, you'd get $50. If you were the only ref, you get 75 or 100. So I would get assigned to places like the worst section of the Bronx, okay, where with no parking available, burnt out cars on the street, a home buildings burnt out, and you'd go into the arena, and there'd be 80 people there with 79 drinking out of brown paper bags,
Right, yeah.
and um, all the wrestlers on this one show, there was only the only name on the show was Bulldog Brower. All the wrestlers spoke Spanish, and I didn't, so we did smilings and handshakes and so forth. Well, in the first match, we were in one of the worst sections of the Bronx, and one of the first matches, this fellow had just got out of the hospital, and it was a tag team match, 2 brothers, and he had had a groin injury. And my back was turned by the face, and the 2 heels were working over his groin behind me.
Mhm.
Well, these people are pretty juiced up with the booze. So I see a guy screaming and yelling and pointing at me, and I see a gun sticking out of his pocket, the handgun.
Oh.
And I'm going, this is not good. I don't think he's saying refuge. He was speaking, screaming in Spanish. I don't think he was saying refuge, doing a good job. So I said, get the promoter out here. So the promoter came. I said, get the gun, or I'm leaving. Oh, he's not dangerous. He's the cousin of the guy getting beat up. I said, get the gun, or I'm going to jump out of the ring now and go to my car. So he took the gun away, and the guy got really annoyed, and I had to watch him look at me the rest of the night. And then people were throwing stuff at me. People were throwing bottles. They were throwing uh, containers of beer. They were throwing anything they could find. And I said to the ring announcer, I said, announce that the match will be stopped if this continues, where they did it more. Well, the last match, Brower comes off the top rope, and this new guy didn't tuck his chin, and he gave him a vicious elbow, and he knocked the guy's teeth out. Guy's
Mm.
bleeding. So we ended the match, and I said to the doctor, I said, you got to go back there and stitch him a little bit, or do something. And he said, I don't want to go back there. I'm afraid. I said, well, I'll go with you. So we both went back there, and and then when I went to get my car, it was locked in a lot with barbed wire fence. They told me the A&P was open till midnight. It would close at 11. My car is the only car in there, and there's a barbed wire fence and a gate. So I went back to the promoter, and he had the lock clipped off. They clipped the lock off so I could get the car out. I said, what's that popping sound I hear? He said, it's gunfire, but don't worry,
Oh
it's
my
3
gosh.
blocks away.
Oh,
So,
jeez.
and then I got home and I noticed there was 75 bucks in my pay, and I had done all 7 matches. So it was like I was it was, and then another night I was in a really bad section of Brooklyn. Freddie Blassie came into the ring. He was the Ayatollah Blassie doing the Sheik. And
Yeah.
Freddie comes in the ring, he looks at the audience and he said, Dave, the people in the audience are tougher looking than the wrestlers because they think we're in trouble. And Freddie was one of the funniest people I ever met in my life. There was a guy 400 pounds sitting in the balcony on 2 chairs, and we got paid according to the number of people. The wrestlers and the ref got paid according to the number of people. So Blassie says to me in the middle of the ring, tell Skolin, who was in charge of the show, go up there and check with that guy. Make sure he bought 2 tickets, because one more ticket could set us into the next pay category. Tell him if he didn't buy 2 tickets, he's got to buy another ticket. He's sitting on 2 seats. So these were some of the things you talk about in the ring. And then another night, I was up in Spanish Harlem, and these 2 guys were undefeated, 2 local big time names, a face and a heel. And the heel picks up the chair and whacks me on the back and knocks me out. Okay. So when I got up, the face had grabbed the chair off the heel,
Yeah.
and I disqualified the face because I thought he hit me. The 300 people in the arena who were all rooting for the undefeated face, now I've ruined his streak, attacked the ring. They attacked the
Oh,
ring. Okay. And I'm
okay.
going, "This is good." So I said to them, now they had 2 judges in those days. They each got $50 to circle the winners. Now, in the old days, the judges would make a decision like the boxers if it went the distance. So I said, there are 2 judges over there, and they're these old timers. I said, go over and talk to them. If they want to change my decision, I'll go along with it. Well, when they all 300 people went to the judges who had no idea what the hell they were talking about, they didn't even know who won or lost. I said to the security, I said, go in there and get my black bag. It's a black bag. They brought it out, they gave it to me, and they escorted me out of the arena to my car and got me on the road. While these 2 guys, so I got a call from the commission the next day and said, you got those guys almost killed. I said, well, better them than me. I said, they got paid 50 bucks a piece. Let them take some heat. And I said, don't ever do that again. But these were some of the independents that I worked on in New York. But the other independents were great. I mean, working for some of the other independent companies, and working 15 years with Northeast Wrestling, with Mike Lombardi, one of the top promoters in the East. He extended my career, because when they dumped the New York officials, when they dumped state officials, um, most of the state officials never worked again, but I worked another 15 years because I worked with several of the big independents. So I was very fortunate, but much different in those days, working independent shows. But on the road with the independents, I had a chance to meet and to eat with the wrestlers. I became very good friends with Toru Tanaka, who was another funny guy. So a lot of great stories about these guys.
Yeah,
Sheik.
actually, speaking of which, who were the big ribbers back in the day out of those guys? And did you ever see any funny or even cool
Um,
ribs?
they were there were a number of I put down a couple. Whoops, did I lose you?
Nope,
I
still
lost.
got
I
you.
can't see. Can you see me?
I can see you. Yep.
And you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll leave it alone. I can't see or hear you, but that's okay.
Okay.
Um, I don't know why. Yeah, there were certain guys. I worked for Mark Tendler, okay, and he used to sell tickets for Vince. He was a wrestler. His wife was Kitty Adams, and he ran in New York. Well, I with Mark, um I what was let's see, what was the, oh, he knew Mark knew I was afraid of heights. Okay.
Okay.
So I come into the locker room and the guys were all ready to rib me, and they said, Dave, first independent wrestling show to have a scaffold match tonight above the ring. And I go, oh, good. I said, good. I'll be down in the ring, and whoever gets knocked out. And they said, well, this is the hard part. The guys are going to be up there, okay, fighting with you, and it's not too big, so you got to be careful because it swings a lot. They're going to bump you out of the ring. I said,
Oh
what?
no.
They said, no, no, they're going to bump you out of the ring, and then one of them's getting get knocked out. But you're going to have to take the bump, and they said it's going to be pretty high. So, but you'll probably be okay. The ring's pretty sore. I said, no, 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 no. I'm not getting up on no scaffolding. And they had me convinced, and I said, you got it. We advertised it. Come on, Dave. If you don't, I'm going to report you to the commission. I said, I'm not getting up in any scaffolding over the ring. Then they started all laughing and telling me that, yeah, no, no, you don't have to, you're not going to do that. But they had me convinced.
That's a
And
good
then
one.
it was the Butcher Paul Vachon, Swede Hansen comedy hour. A Swede
Okay.
replaced wrestler. Nassau College. No, it was a high school out in Long Island. Huge high school or college out in Long Island. Big crowd. Well, Swede was a last minute replacement for someone, and he was going to wrestle his good friend Butcher Vachon. Well, they were playing cards in the locker room, so I went over to them and I said, "Anything special I should know about your match?" Which I would always do with the wrestlers. Leave us alone, kid. Leave us alone. We're playing cards. All right. So I went over a couple times, and I guess I was bothering them. So I guess I better cool it because they were getting a little pissed at me. Okay. So it comes time to go into the ring. And first of all, they were both kind of heels.
Okay.
So we're getting ready to go in, and Swede goes, who should be the face? I said, whoever they root for. Well, the two of them went out and they booed for both of them. So we get in a ring, and um, they decided to pull a rib in the ring on me.
Oh.
And I'm brand new. I'm brand new. I had only maybe done about a dozen shows.
Hmm.
So I get pushed back. No, what's his name? Butcher gets pulled back to the corner. So he comes running out to the middle of the ring and he says, he's pulling my hair, ref. He's pulling my hair, ref. And I'm going, you don't have any hair to pull. And he goes, the hair on my balls. You're not watching the match. What the hell match are you? They wanted me to laugh. They were trying to get me to laugh in the middle of the ring, which a referee can't do.
Right.
So they're pulling this rib where they want me to laugh in the middle of the ring. And then they get into a cradle for about 5 minutes and they said, is your hand red yet? And they're doing everything they can. They're trying every trick in the book to get, and I didn't. So we get back to the locker room, and they said, you're all right. You didn't laugh." I said a couple of times I started to crack a smile, but you go, "No, you didn't laugh. That was okay. But just don't bother us when we're playing cards." So that was
Lesson
that was
learned.
another time, and one of the biggest ribs ever pulled, I think, in a wrestling match was this. Slaughter and the Sheik. Okay.
Okay.
I lost the face. Am I looking all right? Looking at you.
Oh, yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
Um, so at any rate, Slaughter's wrestling the Sheik. Slaughter gets thrown out of the ring and he goes into the crowd. And this guy in the crowd stands up and stomps on him. Okay.
Oh my
Stomps
God.
on him 2 or 3 times. Slaughter gets up and decks the guy. The guy falls down and Slaughter stands on his throat.
Oh,
Now I'm in
geez.
a ring. I'm in a ring with Chronicle, who was under the hood. Oh no, no, yeah, that's right. It was Chronicle under the hood, not the Sheik. That was another time. Chronutle's under the hood, who was a friend of the Sarge, and I'm going, what the hell is he doing? And he says, and the guy goes, I don't know. He really didn't. I don't know. I said, we're all going to get sued. I said, they're going to blame me for not keeping Slaughter in the ring. They come in, the ambulance comes in, they put him on a stretcher, they take him to the ambulance, and the sirens blasting. And Slaughter comes back in the ring, and I said, Sarge, you're such a mellow guy. What the hell were you thinking? The guy shouldn't have stepped on me. Guy shouldn't have stepped on me 2 or 3 times. He'll learn. He won't do that to another wrestler. I said, we're all going to be sued. I said, this is terrible. I said, I hope Tommy's got insurance. Well, we got back to the locker room, and it was a friend of his.
Oh my God. It planted
It was a
there.
friend, but no, Noodle didn't know it. I didn't know it. The only guy that knew it, the promoter came running out. He got scared.
Oh my
And we
God.
were all scared. And he's saying the guy shouldn't have done what he did. He got what he deserved. And I said, Sarge, you're such a mellow guy. I can't believe you would do something. You're a professional. I said, we're all going to be sued. And then he got back to the locker room, and there was the guy in the locker room.
Oh my God. That is hilarious.
So that was a that
That's a good one.
yeah. And then this isn't exactly a rib, but I might mention it. There were a couple of things that happened behind the stage that
Okay.
were kind of funny, but they weren't ribs. But could I share them with you?
Absolutely, of course.
First time I worked with Andre the Giant. Okay, he was feeling a lot of pain in those days. It was the end of his career, and he
Hmm.
was sitting on a table in the locker room reading a paper. So, as I said, I always would go up and say, is there anything I should know special about your match? So I went up to Andre and I said, Andre, it's a pleasure to work your match. You're a legend. I said, is there anything special I should know about your match? He put the paper down. He looked at me very sternly and said, count to 3, and put the paper back up to his face and continued reading like I wasn't even in the room. So I said, okay. And the next few times I worked with him, I counted to 3 and never talked to him again, and figured, let's not get him upset. But there was one independent show that another rib was George Steele. The first time I worked with him, he was
Okay.
sitting on a bench in a locker room eating a hot dog. And I always thought he only ate turnbuckles, but he was eating a hot dog in a locker room, sitting on a cold bench at a high school on a cold night, outdoor show. So I walk in, he's the only one in there. Now, you know how he looks.
Hmm.
He looked at me and I looked at him, and he knew I didn't know him, never worked with him. And he looked at me and I looked with him. He ran off the bench at me as fast as he could and got 2 inches from my face and said, did I scare you?
Oh my gosh.
And I said, I kind of, a little bit.
Just a little bit,
I
just a
said,
little bit, yeah.
I said, I don't know you. And he goes, oh, okay. And then he went back and continued eating the hot dog. So that was a little bit of a rib. I asked him once, I said, how'd you last so long in the business, George? He said, I never fell down. I ate turnbuckles. I had a green tongue and I punched people, but I never fell down. So that's how I ended up, being in the ring so long. But I had to, this isn't really a rib, but it is kind of a rib, but I had to, Chuck Webner, the Bayonne Bleeder, he was a
Okay.
boxer.
Hmm.
He's the real Rocky. Rocky
Oh,
was
right.
based on his
Okay.
stories. He was the guy who was going to go with Muhammad Ali 12 rounds and not knock me out. And he ran up and down the steps in Philly and all of that. So uh, by this time, the poor man was taking a few blows to the head. Well, he was the guest referee. And the promoter said, Dave, would you give him instructions on how to ref in the locker room? I said, well, sure. Okay. So it was a match where the guy, the heel was going to use a foreign object and not get caught. And finally, at the end, Webner was going to catch him. Okay.
Okay.
He was coming down with the foreign object. And I said, Chuck, when I tell you now, grab his hand, he'll drop the foreign object and you push him back and you give him a forearm. I said, do not punch and knock him out. Do not punch the man. Give him a forearm. Okay. But you got to catch that at the right time when he comes down with the, well, there was no foreign object to be had in the locker room. So he got a bunch of popsicle sticks
Oh my
and he
gosh.
put tape around. He put tape around him. Okay.
Yeah.
So the time comes, and well, I'm sitting by the ringside. Webner catches the guy, and he drops the popsicles, the foreign object, and he does the forearm correctly, and then he picks up the foreign object and throws it into the crowd. And we
Oh,
got
well,
back in the locker room, and the heel was going to tear my head off, and the promoter
yeah.
came over and started yelling. I said, I didn't tell him to do that. And Webner goes, well, I thought that some fan would like a souvenir. And I said, "Oh, no. No, you can't.
You
You
can't do
you
that.
you can't be serious." And there was one other funny one too. Mark Tendler, we went to Cherry Point, North Carolina, okay? The plane never took off on time from LaGuardia because I said, "Where's the plane?" They said, "We can't find it." I said, "They're big. You gotta find it." Well, the plane never took off late. And then we got stuck on a small plane on a runway and we got to I had set up the Hertz rent-a-car, okay?
Okay.
And we got to the rental booth. We were half an hour from the show, an hour before showtime. We got to the car rental booth really late, a couple hours late. And so I said, I have a car reserved. And they said, oh, I just gave it away. I figured you weren't coming. I have no more cars. I said, well, what do you mean you have no more cars? He said, no, I have no more cars. I said, do you see the man over there? Mark Tendler had a neck the size of my thigh. And he really was rugged. I mean, he would scare the hell out of you. And he had big gold chains on. I said, do you see that man over there? And he goes, yes. I said, he's going to come over here. He's going to tip you upside down. When your car keys fall out, we're going to take your car. And he said, oh my God. So he ran next door and he got a car from Avis. And he brought it back and said, hey, take it. It's on me. It's on me. But do not let that man near me. Do not let that man near me. And he gave me the car keys. This was a geeky, thin looking guy. He gives me the car keys and I never got a bill for the car. But those are the kind of things that could happen on the road. That you can't, but it was kind of funny.
So going back to the fans for a minute. Now, you've had darts sticking out of your leg. You've had batteries thrown at your face. You've seen fans set the Sheik's car on fire. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen the fans do?
Well, I don't know. There's so many, and they're all kind of equally important. I think the most dangerous was Volkov and the Sheik trying to get the belt back from Wyndham and Rotundo.
Right.
It was at the Westchester County Center. It was the last match. People had been, again, the blue collar workers and the white collar closet fans were drinking big time. It was a very, very cold night. They had the doors open and there were 200 people outside in the street wanting to look through the doors to see if the evil guys from, Iran and Russia would be defeated by the current champions who would beat them a week before in the Garden, Wyndham and Rotundo. So I'm in the middle of the ring with the Sheik and Volkov. And Volkov singing a Russian national anthem. The Sheik is waving the flag. Well, he's waving the flag in front of me, and all of a sudden, his size D flashlight batteries going by my head from
Jeez.
people in the balcony, throwing these
Right.
huge flashlight batteries, which would have killed me if it hit me. I said to the Sheik, will you get on the other side with that goddamn flag? Get that flag out of my face. Go on the other side of the ring. So he did. And I felt something in my wrestling boots. I had worn cut-off wrestling boots because you wanted to slide on those mats that were really hard in those days. They weren't like the mats today. So you needed to have the bottom of the boots would be totally slick. They would shave them down. And
Mhm.
I looked down and there's two darts sticking out of my wrestling boot. People were throwing real darts. They were charging the ring. I was getting hit with canisters of beer, plastic canisters of beer, food. Objects were whizzing by my head. They were charging the ring. They had 3 policemen not near the ring that couldn't contain these people. Somebody threw a chair into the ring. Wyndham and Rotundo aren't even in a ring.
Oh my
And
goodness.
already the ring is up to my ankles in trash. So Wyndham and Rotundo came in a ring. It was supposed to be a 20-minute match, 18, 16-minute match. I said, you know, I would give you 5 minutes and then I'm out of here. I said, I want to die in the middle of a ring. So after about 6 minutes, they went home and I followed them. I went out with the faces. But it was probably the most dangerous and the most weird night I've ever. I thought I was going to be killed. They were closing the beer pavilions. The beer concessions were being closed, and I knew we were in trouble because they were closing them all down. They didn't want people to buy any more beer, and these people were charging the ring. You know, you had about 5,000 people in there.
Right?
So I mean, it was pretty dangerous to say the least. And you talk about heat. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um,
That's real
you
heat.
know,
Yeah.
so that was a crazy night. And of course, the night they set his car on fire.
Yeah.
That I mean, that was another night that I'll never forget. There were you know there were times when I mean the night I worked with Blassie out in Brooklyn, I'm going up the steps to the gym, and it's big Catholic high school. I'm going up the steps of the gym, and I said to the priest, I said, "Are you staying for the wrestling show, Father?" "Oh no, I go back to Manhattan at night." And I'm going, "Oh, okay." He goes, "No, I don't stay out here at night. I go back to Manhattan." You know. So I mean, it's like but you know, there was something about getting an edge in the ring when you could um, when you could put over to people that what you were doing was real. There was an edge to this, you know what I'm saying? There was a certain edge that gave you an adrenaline rush, you might say.
Right.
At least it did to me. It did to me. And you know, there were certain times on the, and there was another show we went to North Carolina with an independent promoter, and we got down there, and it was at a baseball field. And I went to the field. I was there very early. There's a guy cutting the lawn. And we traveled all the way from the East Coast down to North Carolina. And I said, what time's the wrestling show? And he goes, there's no wrestling show here. I said, what do you mean? He
Oh.
goes, that was last week.
Oh.
The guy that the promoter was working with set up the whole show, took that guy's money that was promoting with us and held it a week before, took everything and took off.
Oh
So we
my
were down there.
gosh.
Now the promoter paid all of us to his credit. Bob Bailey, great guy, paid us
Hmm.
all. And he went to the commission, and there's no wrestling commission there. But somebody told him to put a lien on the guy's house so he could never sell it until he got his money. So 4 or 5 years later, the guy calls him and says, I want to pay you. I can't sell my house. And he finally got his money. But we traveled all the way down here. I mean, it was I don't know, 10-hour, 11-hour ride. We get down there, and the guy tells me there's no show. Uh,
Speaking of
so those was
riding though, do the refs usually ride with the refs, or is it usually just mixed and matched?
you ride with the wrestlers.
Yeah, like do the refs ride the wrestlers, or is it mixed, or do the refs usually stick with the refs?
Well, most of the time, well, if I went staying overnight, I would most likely just be by myself. But when I went on the road the first time with NCW, um, I had an interesting match with my first match with the Northeast Championship Wrestling. I worked with for about 9 years. We worked twice a month. It was great shows. It was Tanaka, who was a face at the time, and let's see, who was he with? Cousin Luke against Ted Arcidi and Abby the Butcher. Okay. And the match got totally out. Tanaka was supposed to go over, and this is the first main event I have with the NCW. Tanaka was supposed to go over, and he didn't. I had to call a match because it got total out of bedlam. Abby's hitting, Arcidi hit Cousin Luke with it wrong into the chair and cut his side of his head open.
Okay.
Abdullah Butcher runs out of the ring, gets the ring bell, and starts hitting him on the blood. So I went over to the butcher. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" He says, "Good for the business." So I finally ended up calling the match. Okay, and there's blood all over my shirt. I'm covered with sweat. So I go back to the locker room. And I don't know Butcher. I don't know Tanaka. I don't know any of these guys. My first show, and I said, "Oh my God, I screwed up the finish. They're going to kill me. I screwed up the
Right.
finish. I had to call for the bell because it was 4 guys in a ring, and Luke was bleeding, and I didn't know what else to do. And Abby's hitting him with the bell, and I'm calling for the bell, and there's no bell to ring. So I'm in the locker room, and I'm sitting on a cold bench in a corner, covered in blood and sweat, and here comes Tanaka over to me. I'm going, oh boy. So he's looming over my head and he goes, "Referee, do you have a car?" And I go, "Shit, he's going to take my car." I said, "Well, yeah, I have a car." He goes, "May I ride with you? I cannot stand riding in a van with these smelly wrestlers." And I said, "Absolutely." So him and I traveled quite a bit together. Um, and we had some great experiences at dinner, and also I had Abby in the car a few times. And yeah, I didn't travel a lot with the wrestlers because usually we were coming from different areas. I was coming from Westchester County outside the city. Other guys were coming, most of them lived in Connecticut or New England.
Mhm.
So I didn't do a lot, but we would always eat together and we'd always hang out together. And actually, um, I worked with a guy who set me up. He would rent the van. This guy Tom Casati, who was certainly meant to be in the business because he was a little off the walls, rest his soul. But he would rent me a van. We would pick up 6 wrestlers or 7 wrestlers at Newark Airport on a Friday afternoon, and some big name wrestlers. There was Beefcake, there was Neidhart, a lot of these guys, and Doink the Clown, the original Doink, and then a later one. Well, we would go to Maryland for the first night, or I would drive the van because it was in my name. So we go to Maryland. We'd have the show, and then we party till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then I'd have to drive to the second show in Pennsylvania someplace. And then, no, the first show would be, yeah, in Maryland, not Baltimore, but well below it. Then we'd go to maybe Virginia, West Virginia, and then we'd party till 2 in the morning. And then
Oh,
I'd have to drive to the third place so we could sleep till noon or 1 o'clock, which would usually be in outside the Baltimore area. So then I would go drop them off in Newark on a Sunday night, and I go over to George Washington Bridge at 2 in the morning with my head hung out the window because I'm ready to fall asleep because I got no sleep with the partying, and I'd have to go to work the next day. So I did get a chance to have some experiences with them, and probably the greatest experience was one of the greatest was, and I'd like to forget it. I'm sleeping, and I slept in boxer shorts down to my legs, down to my knees. So I was sleeping in boxer shorts, and I hear a screaming because the promoter would say, "Keep an eye on these guys for me, will you? Don't let them get out of control." So I hear screaming 3 in the morning, fight in room 12. Dave, get down here. Dave, get down here. Big bad fight in room 12. It's going on. It's terrible. Guys are getting hurt. Get down here. So I ran down in my boxer shorts. They pull me into the room.
yeah.
There were 2 girls almost completely naked, and they're filming this on a video camera with me in the middle, and they're dancing to Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
Oh my gosh.
And I've looked for that tape forever and could not find it. But that was one of the ribs that was a classic rib that they pulled on me. But basically, a lot of the guys were younger, good-looking stud guys, and um, I'd sit at the bar with the bartender, male or female, and talk with them. And the guys would come over and check with me, but they were hanging with the young women, and I was older. I was a lot older than them at the time, probably,
Mhm.
even though I was probably only in my 40s. So I had 2 great pickup lines I'd use just for something to do. So girls would come over eventually and say, "Are you anyone famous? They all keep coming over talking to you." And I had 2 great lines that I used to use just to get the girls' attention. One was, "I was a masked super destroyer, former
Oh, okay.
champion."
Okay,
Guy wore a
nice.
mask. Guy wore a mask.
Right?
What he looked like. You look bigger on TV. Camera angle. I
Has
don't
10
even know if
pounds.
there was a masked super destroyer, but I always used to pretend to be him. or I would say I'm their bodyguard. I'm quadruple black belt. I could break your neck with one slice of my hand. I used to do all the big ones, Elvis, Chuck Norris. Really? Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a first thing about karate or martial arts, but I was their protector, and that's why they came to check with me. And in case anybody tried to fool around with them, I could break their neck one swoop. And I would have fun that way, just kind of like for something to do. But they were fun times. I did that for a few years, and they were fun times on the road.
That's awesome. Before we start winding down this interview, there are a couple other things I want to ask you about quickly. So you've got to work with Earl and Dave Hebner, Mike Chioda, all of the great referees. Do referees do you like being a major part of the storylines, or do you prefer just sticking to the bell-to-bell portion? Just for example, there's the storyline in 1999 with the referee strike.
Mm.
Is that something that referees look forward to, or no?
Was that a storyline back then?
It was, yeah, in 1999, yeah, all the referees were on strike for a bit. That was a Vince Russo storyline.
Yeah. Well, being New York refs, we were winding down at that time because they deregulated in 2000. So they weren't letting us work very many matches at that point in time. But Mike Chioda, Joey Morella, Shane McMahon, all were timekeepers when I started when I was in the business back in the 80s and 90s before they became refs. And
Mhm,
Joey Morella in particular, I very much liked working with. Of course, the Hebners were nice to work with, but Joey Morella, I was really fond of. A very quiet guy. His Gorilla Monsoon's stepson, as you probably know.
mhm.
Did you know that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was very, very nice to work with. And he did a very nice thing for me one night. They were trying to get rid of us at the time, the state officials. I can't blame them. They wanted to use their own guys. But Joey just got off the plane and he was exhausted. He'd been in Europe and he was exhausted. And they would try not to use us much. So they had him down for 5 matches and me down for 2 matches.
Mhm.
And Joey looked at the list and he go, and he switched my name with his name because they would post in the locker room the evening matches and they would put D or J after the match to let you know which matches you had. So he put me 5 and him 2. So I was getting ready to go into the ring. And the agent, who wasn't particularly fond of state officials, started screaming and saying, "What the hell are you doing? What?" And he goes, "I'm exhausted. I just got off the plane. I'm exhausted. I can't do 5 matches." He goes, "Well, we got to use Dave. Where are you going? We got to use the good referees. The good referees, Dave." And Joey Morello goes,
Jeez.
"I learned how to ref watching this guy." And he goes, "You're going to tell me he can't go out and do the matches?" You know what I'm saying? So that was really nice of Joey but Joey, I think, was more interested in wanting to be in a baseball than as a ref. I don't think he was extremely happy as a referee, but it paid good money, and he did it because it paid really good money.
Mhm,
Mike Chioda was certainly a great ref for a long time. Dave and Earl, no doubt. But I enjoyed working with the old classic refs too. I enjoyed working with Dick Kroll, Jack Lotz. I worked
mm.
several times with Dick Worley. I like Dick Kroll a lot because he would talk about a lot of the old days. He was in a match where Blackjack Lanza had his leg sliced in a Boston Garden by a machete. Did you
Oh
know
my
about
God.
that?
No,
Yeah,
hadn't heard that
guy
one.
jumped in the ring. Guy jumped in the ring and sliced Lanza's leg. He had to have about 150 stitches or something.
Jeez.
And the guy ran out of the ring, and Monsoon was in a runway, and Monsoon pushed him into a cop, and the cop let him go because they thought it was part of the show,
Oh my God.
and they never caught the guy. So,
Wow.
and Dick was in the ring the night Bruno lost the belt, and they were afraid to announce that there was a new champion. So I don't even think they announced that he had lost the belt because they figured a riot would break out, and he gave him
Right?
the belt in the locker room.
Wow.
And Bruno, that was the night Bruno thought he lost his hearing because the entire garden went silent. You could
That's
hear a pin
crazy.
drop.
Pin drop. Yeah, I heard that.
So
Yeah.
I liked working with Dick, and another good friend was Billy Caputo. He was a blonde-haired ref. I don't know, a little He used to be on TV a lot. He had long blonde hair and bleach blonde hair, and he was another great guy, and he helped me in my early days to ref. I loved working with the classic refs too, but I also enjoy working with the newer people.
What did you think of the angle, the twin referee angle with Earl and Dave and Hogan and Andre and Ted DiBiase?
I thought it was unique. I thought it was unique, but they weren't exact twins, so I kind of picked up right away when the other one came in the ring. But I thought it was a good angle, and it worked, and you need some surprises like that from time to time. You know what I'm saying? To give a little interest to the match. Nothing wrong with pulling like what did they have, the three doinks at one time, or three
Yeah,
somebody at one time? They had
yeah.
three somebody at one time. But yeah, once in a while, if you use a little bit of a different angle, like I often said that there should be a tag, there should be a battle royal of all the doinks from across the country. Get all the doinks, anybody who's ever played doink, and get them into a battle royal. But it's kind of neat to do some surprises, once in a while. But again, I thought it was a decent angle.
Your book has lots of obviously great stories and it has lots of little tidbits as well. Some like Matilda having no teeth. I thought that was really
Yeah,
funny,
yeah.
actually. I laughed so loud when I read that.
Oh,
Um,
here's a pit bull running across the ring, charging at my leg, and I froze. And I says, "Get her away, get her away!" And one of them said, "Don't worry, she has no teeth." You know,
yeah, and there's other stories in there as well, like snakes crawling up your leg in the shower and dragons running around amok. I mean,
the
like must
Komodo
have been like a
dragon.
zoo. Yeah.
He had a Komodo dragon running around outside, and they had us go look for it. And I'm looking under ladies' seats, and we're pretending to be chasing back Bob Backlund, who was going crazy at the time. And the woman goes, "I don't think Backlund's hiding under my seat." I couldn't tell him that the dragon was loose. It might have caused a panic. So there was a lot of funny stuff like that went on. You know, and some of these guys were just real characters. Danucci was a character. Freddie Blassie was a phenomenal character. Some great Freddie Blassie stories in there. And there's a story about a high school kid named Paul Heyman in there. You can read about him in the book. Um, I let him in the back door at a WWF show. Paul Heyman, high school kid, wanting to hand out a mimeograph sheet of paper with a few faded pictures on it. That was my first time dealing with Paul, whose father's
Crazy.
taxes I collected, by the way. I collected the taxes of Arnie Skoll and Fred Blassie and Paul Heyman, school taxes, town taxes.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I was an elected government official for a good portion of the end of my life. I worked 23 years running one of the largest tax collection offices in the state of New York, about $500 million a year. And Paul Heyman's parents and Freddie and Arnie were all live within 20 minutes of me, 20 minutes, half an hour of me. So I knew Paul way back when.
That's amazing. Amazing story. You've had an amazing life, so many different careers, as you said. Thank you so much for writing the book. Said I really enjoyed to read. It was a fantastic
Thank
read
you
for
for saying
myself.
that.
Um, Before I let you go, I'm gonna do some word association. I have a couple people here, and whatever the first word comes to your mind or a story, whatever, just say it. Um,
Okay.
Howard Finkel.
Um, One of my two favorite announcers. He to me was the best. And we'd get in the ring at Madison Square Garden, and you could not. I always got the first match, and you could not believe the goose pimples I would get when he would say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," and just a wonderful, wonderful man, and was around for a long time. I loved working with him. Unique, unique. And my other favorite announcer was a guy I grew up with, Friendly Bob Freed. The tall guy with a pointed nose.
How about Bobby Heenan?
Uh, my favorite color commentator with Gorilla Monsoon. Um, Character, one word character, a real character. Uh, he he was I would say he was the funniest guy I knew in wrestling. He was the funniest guy, really funny, quick-witted, quick brain. He used to say things about me in the ring like if the bad guy was taking over the match, he would say this referee wouldn't even make a good mall cop, you know, or he would say the gorilla would say referee caught the guy's foot in the ring on a rope. Referee caught the foot in a rope, and Heenan would say, "Well, it's the first thing he's seen all night," you know, and stuff like that. And he argued with me when Rue threw me across the ring, and I disqualified him in a match with Duggan in the Garden. And he came in and was on his knees begging me to let him go another 10 minutes and not disqualify him. Could I reverse the disqualification? I said, no way. He said, why not? And I said, because Vince will fire me. It's just not the end. He started laughing. But he was just the funniest, just a classic, just a classic. Great manager, great on the microphone, quick-witted. What could you say?
Right? Absolutely. How about Tony Atlas?
Tony, I worked with when he was tag team champion. I worked with him on the um, Tony. I felt bad for. He went through a lot of money, and fell on some hard times later in his career. He once told me, he said, Dave, I used to bring money home in wheelbarrows. Now I can't afford the wheelbarrow. But he always put on a good show, whether it was the independents. One word to describe him: well built, muscular. Um, he was with Rocky Johnson, and I worked with Rocky on the independents a few times, not often.
Mhm.
Him and Rocky were the first African American tag team champions, and Tony was a big man. He was big and impressive when started working with him in his first days uh, um, in the WWF. I always enjoyed working with Tony.
He's still pretty big right now. I just saw him a few weeks ago in Philadelphia. He's got some arms on him still.
He
Absolutely.
always has a good smile on his face.
Yes, yes.
Always a smile on his face, and always glad to see me. And we went through some good times together on the road, and worked with him a lot on the independent.
One last question before I let you go. Your Mount
Sure.
Rushmore of referees.
The Mount Rushmore of referees.
Yes, sir.
Uh, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't want to comment on that. You know why? Because they
No? Okay.
all. No, I'll tell you why. They all had some, I think, really, really great. Um, they all added something. If I had to pick, I'd go back to the classic days of maybe even some of the guys I watched. But if I had to pick refs for the Mount Rushmore for me, you'd have to separate the classic and the later area. I would put Dick Kroll, Dick Worley up on a classic era back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. I'd put Kroll. I would put Dick Worley. Um, I used to watch guys like Dusty Feldbaum, people like that. Um, and then the newer guys, there was just so many of them. Mike Chioda was such a great ref, Joey Morella, the Hebners. It's tough to pick a few because they were all people I loved working with, and I wouldn't want to single some of them out. You know what I'm saying? It would be tough to single them out because they all had something to contribute. We all did. We were all a little bit different in our approaches. I was old school throughout, so even in the 90s and 2000s, I would still be old school. So most of the time on the independent circuit, if there was more than one ref, I'd get the matches that would have the classic guys in it, or maybe some of the other classic women. But the guys that I just mentioned were the guys that were, to me, the referees I enjoyed working with.
Very good. Dave, it's been an honor. Been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Um, thank you for all the contributions you've done. Thank you for the memories. And yeah, I just want to say thank you again. It's
Could I just
said
say one
I
thing?
cannot. Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
I have to say thank you to the fans, because people don't realize today, without the fans, we were nothing. I don't care about the wrestlers, the refs. I had such great admiration for the fans, especially back in the classic era, but also today. They're very knowledgeable about the sport and the entertainment aspect of it. And I just, that's why I wanted to write the book. It's dedicated to fans of all ages, of all generations, because without the fans, like I say, we were really nothing. And it was that give and take with the fans that really made it for me. So I want to just thank all the fans out there for being such great, being such a great part of something that, I mean, for me, it was an ordinary life. I looked like a geek with my suit and tie and little briefcase, but I could become someone else in the locker room. It made an ordinary life extraordinary. And as I said before, no one ever paid to see a ref, but my job was to make the guys look good. And I think that's probably why I stuck around for 32 years, because I realized my job was to make them look good. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
You did a great job. Thank you for coming on the show. And wrestling fans, you heard the man. Go buy the book. It's called Ring Man. You can buy it wherever books are sold.